Our first reader is going to be Donika Kelly. She's the author of The Renunciations and Bestiary. Bestiary is the winner of the Cave Canem Poetry Prize, a Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. As a graduate, she's a Cave Canem graduate fellow and founding member of the collective Poets at the End of the World, and her poems have been published in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, The Parish Review, and Fog Lifter. She's an assistant professor in the English department at the University of Iowa, where she teaches creative writing. Donika Kelly.
Thank you for that introduction. It's such a pleasure to be reading with Blacksmith House tonight. Andrea, thank you for the invitation. Gail, thank you for starting the series. It's a pleasure to be in this season with y'all. So I'm going to read some poems from the Renunciations, and the structure of the book is that there are these two sort of strands that weave around each other, twist around each other, and I'm going to read the one that is less sad because that is my feeling right now. And I just want to start my timer because that helps me to feel safe, timely. Okay, so I'm going to read I'm going to start with the first poem in the collection, which is titled House of Air, Hours of Fire. I was born into a house of air, my dad born to share his burden. I was his dominion, a bit of land turned to use. Where he plowed, I was worn, and where worn, I strained. I knew little of the life behind the hand that sounded me, that turned the field, that planted the maize, yet I answered to his name as if it were my own. Then came the fallow, when I came into my body as a horse, as a bird, as a beetle scurrying in the brush. For many seasons, I was known by his name, but rarely worked by his hand. The field receded, overgrown. Then came the hours of fire. Her joy at my taking her name, one given to her mother and taken by her, the undergrowth charred to ash. In the distance, a house, neither mine nor his. Was I happy? Happier, yes, to have some sky, to see the horizon, to want to know my body unworked. I lived in the flame, practiced being incomplete, a progression, an action without place. I once thought it a carapace I shed, that house, that name, my time as a field. But I think of the fire, the brief time I will have held her name, this one shell taken for another, and I know I am palimpsest. I house the air, the earth and flame, though nearly anything can be overwritten, and what can be left behind is no more or no less a matter of will. So there's a sequence in the collection that are epistolary poems, letter poems, and the titles are all the same in the sequence. It's Dear, D-E-A-R, and then an M dash. So giving you little 19th century letter writing vibes. And so I'm going to read a few of those poems tonight. So this one is titled Dear. And I will say, I wrote this poem when I was living in California in 2015, 2016, and that drought was stressful. I think not just for the people living there, but also for the land. So Dear. We come from abundance, each season bowed with rain, but here is the earth, eager to flame, the air like salt, thirsty even for the water we carry in our skin. New wanderers in this land, we do not know how to wait for water, have never waited so long for rain that every tree died, left to stand tender. For now, I watch the shoulder burn, drive through the smoke that blots the mountains and holds the old yoke of sun. I know nothing of fire, its reach, its spread. Know only that everybody makes its own ash, manages its own diminishing. In the chapel of St. Mary's. I can't tell you what happened there, why I entered the sanctuary a non-believer, only that I have been thinking about worship, the altar of the body, and supplication for some time. My thoughts turn, as they often do in this season of absence, to my wife and how tired a God can get when called, and too often for little reason but loneliness. Of course, I don't mean God here, but rather the woman I love, who alters the orbit of my life, pulls me with a density of light toward her, the draw thinner when she is farther away, as she is now. I try to find comfort in the inevitability of science when what I lack is faith. The sanctuary, the stained glass, 4 girls saturating it with soft chatter, small pots of stargazer lilies, a lace ribbon for each pew. This place is full of faith in the unknown, and I don't know how to believe in what I cannot see. Tonight, I will drive through the foothills and into the valley. I will try to make a little practice to trust you are with me, even though you are somewhere else. This next poem, the occasion of this next poem was being at a roller skating rink, which is a delight. And I don't know if the poem is a delight, but that the memory of the space certainly is for me. So this poem is titled Citing Virtue, Rivergate Skate Center, Nashville, Tennessee. The man in orbit blooms a heart on his back. The heart blooms wings of water, and in me rises not mercy, but a sense of order. I've drifted, loosed from the one who bound me, a planet with no anchoring star. And I know this man is neither God nor sidereal body, but neither is he a woman with an alchemical heart. His skin, his beard, his full breast enrapture me, draw my gaze from every other whirling body. I've drifted, and I know the man in orbit is not a man in orbit, but one in revolution, where revolution means change or a way of moving, where muscle ripples to water, moves from a state of gold to one of lead. Dear, your voice, broken as a body when you speak of loss, of losing her, awash in the grief that comes, I know, when the one you love lets go and it's nothing you've done. This morning, I dreamed again of birds, blue and dead, wings lifted in a parody of flight. And yes, I'd sworn off the birds' love, and so they died, as any living thing might. That's one reading, I suppose, another way of letting go after having held you once, for a while, content with the shape of what was. Perhaps the birds were an augury from myth, but who knows what promise will rise or perish come morning. Hymn. Excuse me. Dear river, dear creek, dear dammed tributaries, dear fuse, dear dynamite and wet match. Amen. The water don't love me and she don't love me, and maybe I'm drowning from the inside. Who put the river in my arm, said, don't let the water. Maybe the knife got a hard kiss and a sweet bite. Maybe the knife only metal and wood and a bit of brass, but maybe it know how to love the inside of me. Maybe I don't believe in meaning, in God, and plans and paths. And the closer I am to my animal self, the more human I am, the more I let myself break like a wave, ocean in my arm, stone in my arm, iron and wood and brass in my arm. So the next one I'm going to read is titled Citing Tarot. And I don't know if y'all are folks who get tarot readings or have had your cards read. I don't know if y'all are folks who have had your cards read in front of a group of your friends by a friend and it's been devastating. I don't know. Like if you've been there, I feel like that might be a niche experience, slightly more niche. But every time I read this poem, I just like can't believe this happened. So citing Tarot, Pflugerville, Texas. And Pflugerville is a suburb just north of Austin. I learned how to hug here, how to draw a boundary and hold here against the gale force of my mother's late night rage and sob. Learned too what it meant to be chosen, to choose. Brought myself back to the receiving line, my chest cracked into 2 wet pieces after a fall so lonesome I wasn't sure I'd survive, and met the arms practiced in mending. I asked Jenny to read my cards. Sid and Shannon on the couch behind me, Amber and Joe in the kitchen, Nat in from Berkeley, the kids running around, Carlicia, I'm sure, at my right hand. Jenny spread the Celtic cross, gestured as she does, which is to say grandly, at my present, at the problem we all knew, the past, the conscious and unconscious, waited for the cards to name what we could all see there at the position of hopes and fears. 3 swords and 1 heart. How rude, I thought. Do y'all see this shit? I said aloud, the room gone quiet. A relief not to have to say what I had known in the room where I had learned the kind of love possible between friends, now family, the kindness possible between partners. Grateful for the rough blow finally landed and the net to catch me. That was a hard card. I was like, oh no. I see some folks nodding, so y'all know that's a bit of a rough one. Okay. So I was in sort of kind of Northern California, kind of Central California. I was living in Sacramento. And then I moved to Western New York. It's a very different climate. I had never known winter before, although I had imagined that I had. Even now, I think like how naive I was to think that I knew winter in Western New York, having lived through 2 Iowa winters, which was like a different monster altogether. So there was something really jarring about that transition, and I kept having this experience. The first line is like a very literal experience, but when it would snow there, I would think it was ash. And I think that was just like having been in California for like a year. And I was just like, what is this falling from the sky? And snow is not ash, as it turns out. So this one's titled Deer. I take the first snowfall for ash. Mistake, I mean, the first flake that comes wisping down for the remnant of something burned, perhaps for warmth or an error. When we were young, we stood with our backs not to the past or future, but toward the hot desperation of being alive and for right now. At the canyon's edge, the wind, thick as a hand, ready to push you into gorge and river rock. Come back, I said, and the wind took my voice too. Love, there is no fire here, only water, drifting to coat the grass, to keep it green, to heap the limbs and needles in wet, heavy white. Where I end up, Western New York. We pushed through high desert into a new wilderness, the air filling with water and timber and rich earth the farther east we went. Too far and older than anywhere I've ever lived, and riven with loneliness. At night and alone, I imagine the ghosts this place carries pushing through the earth like water. I wonder whether the ones I carry will find a home here, or if they will wander with me, faithful and true. What I bring, I've always had. A dull knife, a child afraid of the night and herself, the woman you left. Still, there's only doing and done, the same sun, and who can remember home? So this next poem, the thing that I would like for you to know, you don't need to know this, but there's a man mentioned in here who I call my guide. It's really one of my grandpa's dear friends. His name is Steve. And I don't know if y'all have watched The Simpsons or Ted Lasso, but either way, he's like a Ned Flanders, Ted Lasso type. He has the mustache and everything. His name. So Steve is a fun person to hike with because it's a lot of motivation. I also don't like hiking, so that was helpful. But also he kept saying almost. I was like, Steve, when do we stop? Steve was like, we're so close. So this is titled Sighting Almost, Vernal Fall, Yosemite National Park. Never mind the 600 stairs carved in granite, or my guide, a man with a mustache and no concept of almost, or my moaned, why are we going up this hill at every hill, or his response that what comes up must go down, or the somewhere we've almost reached. Mind instead, the three friends who breached the safety rail for a picture on the rocks and were swept over the falls by a river gorged with the melting snowpack. How they must have held each other in their descent before the Merced broke them apart. That was some time ago. An old man hiking with his son flatters me. You were only pretending to be tired to make us feel better. The truth. I have come here to learn how not to kill myself. My guide takes my picture many times as we ascend. He captures Half Dome, El Capitan, Nevada Fall, and me, nearly upright, a silhouette before the sun. A dead thing that in dying feeds the living. I've been thinking about the anatomy of the egg, about the two interior membranes, the yolk held in place by the chalazi, gases moving through the semi-permeable shell. A curious phrase, the anatomy of the egg, as if an egg were a body, which it is, as if the egg could be broken, then mended, which, depending on your faith, broken, yes, but mended, well. Best to start again with a new body, voided from a warmer one, brooded and turned. Better to begin as if some small-handed animal hadn't knocked you against a rock, licked clean the rich yolk, and left the albumin to dry in the sun, as if a hinged jaw hadn't swallowed you whole. What I wanted, a practice that reassured that what was cracked could be mended or at least suspended so that it could not spread. But now I wonder, better to be the egg or scaled mandible, the small hand or the flies, bottle black and green, spilling their bile onto whatever's left, sweeping the interior, drinking it clean. I think something might have grown there, though I know it was never meant to be eaten. It was always meant to spoil. This next poem is titled Deer, and it's maybe the only one that has an actual deer in it. I was driving to pick up my dogs from the kennel, and I saw on the side of this road in this hollow in Western New York, a crow standing on a rib cage. And I was like, well, here's a poem. You know, occasionally a poem presents itself. And that definitely felt like at that occasion. So I went to get the dogs, and then I came back, and the crow was gone. But there was this deer carcass left on the side of the road. Deer. I saw the crow first, on the shoulder turned to mud, then its shadow, then the cage of bone arcing up from the muck. April thaw, the doe untagged, head intact, the rope looped about her neck, blue and man-made. Below the neck, the body emptied, the muscle inexpertly butchered, no doubt in some dark hollow, the ribs scraped a dirty gray, gristle and fat, the remnants. Look, all of this was out of season. The doe tossed on the roadside, the melted snow, even me standing over the carcass, and why? The crow long gone now, and what marked the line between winter and spring? The last poem I'll read, and thank you for your good attention and your nodding, I really appreciate it, is titled, so I'm gonna read this last poem. It's titled, The Moon Rose Over the Bay. I had a lot of feelings. The home I've been making inside myself started with a raising, a brush clearing, the thorn and nettle, the blackberry bush falling under the bush hog. Then I rested, a cycle fallow, said winter, said the ground is too cold to break pony, said I almost set fire to it all, lit a match, watched it ghost in the wind. Came the thaw, came the melting snowpack, the flooded river, new groundwater, the well risen. I stood in the mud field and called it a pasture, stood with a needle in my mouth and called it a song. Everything rushed past my small ears, were in the leaves, were in the wing and the wood. About time to get a hammer, I thought. About time to get a nail and saw. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much, Donika. Really, really happy to have you here, and all of those deers, and one deer or parts thereof. Yeah. And I encourage everyone to keep nodding for Matthew as well. Great. And let me remind you all as well, if you do have, we can have a Q&A afterwards. If you all have answers or questions for our authors, and you can put those in the chat and we'll do that afterwards. Thank you. Matthew Olzmann is the author of Constellation Route, as well as 2 previous collections of poetry, Mezzanines, and Contradictions in the Design. He's a recipient of fellowships from Kundiman, McDowell, and the National Endowment for the Arts, and his poems have appeared in the New York Times, Best American Poetry, the Pushcart Prizes, Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. He's a senior lecturer of creative writing at Dartmouth College and teaches in the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College. And he's wearing a tie. Matthew Olzmann.
Hi, it's great to be with you. I'm going to read some poems from this newer book, Constellation Route, which is mostly epistolary poems, and there's also a poem that that references a tarot reading, though I'm probably not going to read that one. That was a that appears in Kathy Lynn Che's poem, and as I said that, I realized I might have just made this confusing, but since this is mostly epistolary poems, and I included some letters from other poets in here, but this one is 14 letters to a 52 hertz whale. One, dear 52 hertz whale, because you sing at a frequency no other whales can hear, scientists have nicknamed you the world's loneliest whale. I'm sure it's unbearable out there, swimming through eternity, calling out, calling out, calling out, and never getting a reply, never hearing a kind word in response. Wherever you are, I hope you're being careful. 2, dear 52 hertz, would it be weird if I came to the ocean to visit? I haven't figured out the logistics of this, but it'd be cool to hang for a while. The problem is I don't know how to find you. I could get to the beach, but then what? If I swam out to meet you, I'd get eaten by tiger sharks. If you swam to the shore, you'd get stuck and then you'd die. Once there was a video going around the internet of a beached whale and it was dead and the villagers didn't know how to get rid of the carcass, so they tried to blow it up with a bunch of dynamite. That didn't work out too well for anyone. 3, dear whale, it was stupid of me to mention that other whale getting blown up with all the dynamite and everything. Totally insensitive. Sorry, I have no grace. I've been told this before, that I have no grace. I apologize. I'm just trying to make conversation. I'm no good at this. Sorry. 4, hey whale, do you ever dress up as other animals? If so, what kind? It's almost Halloween out here. I was just wondering. 5, dear whale, Halloween was totally stupid. This one little kid came to the door dressed as a dolphin, but he had a net over him. And I said, what's with the net? And he said, every year, hundreds of thousands of dolphins and whales are killed by the tuna fishing industry because they don't know how to avoid the nets. And I thought he was insulting your intelligence. So I said, look, motherfucker, you don't know a goddamn thing about whales. Get off my porch. 6, maybe I overreacted there. 7, dear whale, you ever see people swimming nearby and think to yourself, I could really have some fun with this? 8, like maybe you could surface right next to them and yell something like, Jonah, I've been looking for you, and then open your mouth really wide. 9, that's what I would do. 10, I don't know, maybe whales have better things going on. 11, do whales believe in providence? 12, You ever float on your back and scrutinize the stars up there and see unexpected figures among them, like maybe the shapes of other whales? Do you assign them names and imagine stories for those make-believe creatures as they drift through the dark? Do those stories lend structure to your days and nights? Do they comfort the nervous waters, constellate the disjointed heavens, and render the marvelous in a manner you can endure? Do you believe them? 13. How cold is the bottom of the ocean? How crushing is the pressure down there? 14. You ever worried because your voice is impossible to hear? Maybe no one will make the effort, that you can work really hard and try to be a good person and try to make a difference in your community. But then at the end of the day, the waves will just swallow you whole. They will take you under. You'll disappear from the world and you won't even leave a ripple on the surface. This is a letter written while waiting in line at Comic-Con. Klingon, Parseltongue, Na'vi. People invent imaginary languages so imaginary citizens of imaginary worlds can speak to one another. Elvish, Ewokese, Dothraki. You can learn these languages, come to a convention with your face painted blue or a leather scabbard bolted to your back and talk to people who will understand you. I understand what language feels like when you're not understood. More than once, I thought some other planet might be my home. Last week, in an alley, I saw one man punch another man until neither looked like a person. There are hundreds of reasons like this one to long to be from some other galaxy, century, or dimension. Reasons to put on a spacesuit or a wizard's cloak and hope no one will recognize you. But it's not these costumes that amaze me. It's always been the languages, the way they reach for something that can't be said in our tongue. In the only language I know, there are not enough words for parabola or isotope, too few phrases to say I'm sorry or I'm glad that I found you. Though we've been married for years, I wish we met when we were children. If we had known each other in the year you spent alone on Earth without one friend, we could have been aliens together. I'd have those green four-fingered hands, you with your glow-in-the-dark antennae, words in the form of strange whirling noises, wisps of static, lamentations of rain. Only you and I would know what these sounds meant. This is a letter to someone living 50 years from now. Most likely you think we hated the elephant, the golden toad, the thylacine, and all variations of whale harpooned or hacked into extinction. It must seem like we sought to leave you nothing but benzene, mercury, the stomachs of seagulls rippled with jet fuel and plastic. You probably doubt we were capable of joy, but I assure you we were. We still had the night sky back then, and like our ancestors, we admired its illuminated doodles of scorpion outlines and upside-down ladles. Absolutely, there were some forests left. Absolutely, we still had some lakes. I'm saying it wasn't all lead paint and sulfur dioxide. There were bees back then, and they pollinated a euphoria of flowers so we might contemplate the great mysteries and finally ask, hey guys, what's transcendence? And then all the bees were dead. This is a letter to Bruce Wayne. A good place to hide a drop of water is a stream. A good place to hide a stream is beneath an ocean. A good place to hide a man is among thousands of other men. Watch how they rush through the city like water through a ravine. I've searched many famous cities for you. There are 3 listings for Bruce Wayne in Houston, 2 in Pittsburgh, 1 in Miami, and 1 in LA. In Tampa, Bruce Wayne is a retired chemistry teacher. In Flagstaff, he drives a taxi and hopes to procure a diamond for his soon-to-be fiancée. A good place to hide a star is a galaxy. A good place to hide a galaxy is a universe. Look at the night sky. Justice used to be a cowl and cape, the flicker of wings under an ateliated moon, and you, like a gargoyle, crouched atop some stone edifice. To conceal a universe, place it in a multiverse, that hypothetical clutch of alternate realities. The dilemma of the word alternate is how it implies a norm, a progenitor stream from which an alternate diverges. Which is the alternate? Which is right here, right now? There is no such thing as Gotham City, but here is Gotham City, and I've been so naive, believing the truth of the old mythologies, how they promised a recognizable villain, a clown with a ruby-slashed mouth, a lunatic's laugh, In the universe where I exist, supervillains look like anyone else. Give them an old flannel to wear and a square jawline to smile at the world, and suddenly they're shouting, "Get out of my country," from the window of a passing car. They're hanging a noose in our middle school bathroom. They're pulling a pistol in a crowded barroom or bus stop or the middle of the street. They could be anyone. They could be everywhere. A good place to hide a sociopath is a full-length mirror. A good place to hide that mirror is the heart of America. In the battle of good versus evil, I was so sure good would win. Now I just hope something good will survive, get a job cutting hair or selling cars, make it home for dinner. I suspect there's a parallel dimension where you, vigilante, long for this as well. To live a normal life is victory enough. To remain anonymous and not be spat upon on the subway. In Boston, Bruce Wayne owns a pawn shop. In Milwaukee, he plays pinochle and feeds stray cats. In New Hampshire, he goes fly fishing on the Sugar River, reels in one brook trout after another. When he removes the hook from a mouth, he might place the fish into a cooler, or he might set it back into the stream, the alternate or the original, no longer certain in which he stands. And I'll read a few newer poems, or poems from a newer project. This is called Like a Dish Rag Soaked in Bleach. Like a dish rag soaked in bleach, this new pandemic, or maybe the next, or maybe some unknown future contagion, will comprehensively scrub any of us from the earth, the way the waitress comprehensively wipes down the diner's counter 2 seats from me, sprays the surface with Lysol, then wipes everything away again, spotless. It is late February, in the first year of the virus. In a month, this place will be closed. Next month, it will no longer exist. But for now, the experts are saying, wash your hands, everything will be fine. So if you should, coughing just once into the concern of your elbow, sit next to me at this counter, then look up to say what's good. I'll say the coffee is so good, and also the cheeseburger. And you must try the vanilla milkshake. The onion rings are excellent. The jalapeno poppers are exquisite. And here's the sports page, which says a guy just broke the world pole vaulting record. And that is also good. I don't want to ignore peril. I'm not trying to distract from the threat of plague, war, or famine, fate like a meteor whistling toward us. I'm just saying it's good to have lived, even briefly, in a time when one's vocation, one's destiny, can be the use of a pole to vault over a different pole, which for me seems bizarre, though less bizarre than other sports such as, let's say, bog snorkeling, cheese rolling, or eel pulling, which was basically tug of war with a live eel and popular in the Netherlands in the 1800s. Any action can become a contest. Any contest is one we'll try to win. The burger I recommended, the world record for competitive burger eating is 32 in 10 minutes flat. Man versus virus is another competition. The odds might not be in our team's favor. I don't know how much time you or I have left, or if the final buzzer is about to buzz, but I love being here on this strange planet I love so much, sitting here eating lunch and contemplating, while I still can, this specific strangeness, love, paying the bill before returning to that strangeness, and how each time when heading for the door, always, if I turn around before exiting, always, if I look to the place where I once was, I see already the rag has rubbed the surface clean. The counter sparkles as if I were never there. Nothing left but shine. This is a statement from the Council of the Greater Good. And I've been kind of intrigued with press statements and speeches that use like a sort that speak for a collective. So, statement from the Council of the Greater Good. With regards to the incident which elicited grave consternation from our constituency, we, the Council of the Greater Good, after activating the appropriate task forces, subcommittees, and advisory panels, have determined that the incident responsible for initiating this inquisition was singular in nature, as in we do not have a plurality of occurrences, as in we do not have an incident that exists as one of many filaments in a web-like ecosystem of comparable incidents. Instead, we have what we would call an anomaly, and we hereby declare the anomaly is Tim. Tim did not prune the hedges lining his property. Tim did not participate in the Super Saturday Bake-Off. Tim sometimes strolls through the neighborhood, faintly humming a tune none of us can recognize. What the hell, Tim? That's just weird, Tim. Get it together, Tim. Did someone not hug you when you were a child, Tim? We are concerned. We are wounded, and we, the Council of the Greater Good, have evaluated the moral, ethical, and ontological ramifications of Tim and his Timness, and we conclude Tim is a mortal threat to our communal prosperity. The presence of Tim over there undermines our presence over here. We represent the whole of society, hence the greater good. Tim represents only Tim. We are an aggregate of legions. What's Tim an aggregate of? An aggregate of Tim? Is that a thing? We are a paragon of holistic contemplation and think about the preeminent matters of our time. Tim thinks whatever the hell Tim thinks about. Did Thomas Hobbes suggest in a natural state a human's life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, thus necessitating a social contract to protect individuals against the larger assembly? No, he said this social contract exists only, and we quote, to protect the whole of society against some dork nozzle going rogue, asserting his individuality by pissing in the waters of our groupthink. Would you board a boat with a Tim-shaped hole in its hull? No, you wouldn't. Would you leap from a plane using a parachute with a Tim-sized tear through the fabric? Absolutely not. Therefore, Tim must be tackled and subdued, must be flogged and ridiculed, must be Frankenstein stitched back into the fabric of society. With his life, he must plug the leak, mend the material. Otherwise, big problem for us all. Otherwise, the fabric unravels, goes back to being just loose threads, and Earth is like Earth was when we were simple, when we were alone in the wild, afraid of all things, and all things were endless. Blake Griffin dunks over a car with a full gospel choir crooning behind him, with 20,000 spectators surging to their feet, with an arena of flashbulbs flashing its approval. And I'm spellbound, thinking it's all so spectacular until the broadcast team weighs in and Charles Barkley says, that wasn't the greatest dunk ever. And Marv Albert says, but the presentation was pretty fun. And I'm made to revisit what I thought I just saw as one question replaces all others. Was it truly extraordinary? Or by the paragon of unimpeachable aesthetic standards by which the annual NBA slam dunk competition is adjudicated, was it actually pedestrian, mortal, a somewhat meh occurrence made mythic only by gimmicks and frills? Like those little fish that eat bits of plastic in the Pacific because they believe bits of plastic look like microscopic food particles, I too can be charmed by any well-crafted illusion. Copperfield makes the Statue of Liberty disappear. Penn and Teller catch bullets between their knowing teeth. Smelling like a new vacuum cleaner, the con man in my heart successfully hawks all his useless trinkets to the hopeful stooge who stumbles through my brain. Snake oil and radium ore, the furcula of a partridge, the foot of a rabbit. I want to believe in the marvelous, not because it feels authentic, but because the alternative is a world where no one dons a cape to leap over buildings, no one turns lead into kindness, no one sings the crack into sleep. In a kingdom that insists on repudiating all enchantments, I feel catastrophic and alone. I watch the trees get older. I watch the ice form on their branches. Last week, I sat in an emergency room after my wife collapsed at work. Her doctors asked questions, but gave no explanations. They sent us home not knowing why or what, or if it would happen again. You can look for answers, but sometimes there's no wand to wave, no sorcery to make anything okay. There's just doubt, and it rocks you toward whatever trick of the light will cling to next. I will reach for any rationale offered. I might pray or go to a church where a priest tells a story about transubstantiation, hands me a chalice filled with possibilities, and I know there's no blood in there. I know the wine will taste like wine. Still, I lift the cup. And so whenever I read a poem that references my wife, I always can hear her voice in my head. And my wife is a poet, and Viby Francis, and she always tells me that she's like, Matthew, your best poems are about me. You should write more poems about me. And then when I do, she'll always say, Matthew, stop writing poems about me. Everyone's looking at me. So it's I'll close with I'll go in a kind of completely different direction with this. And this is, I think I'll let this one be the last poem I read. Thank you for having me here and for listening to these. Elephant. I have 40,000 muscles in my trunk and 396 in the rest of my body. I can remember a boneyard from 3 lamentations ago. I can smell rain 6 countries away. I think I have something to offer the world. I apply for a job with the circus. They say, we'd prefer a clown, someone who can juggle. I say, but I have a trumpet attached to my face. They say, we don't like trumpets. Jazz is a dying art form. I too have been a dying art form, but look at me now. I let them hear my horn, one slow note from the memory pit. They call security. I swat some flies with my tail. They tell the guards to escort me from the property. I think I have something to offer you. Outside the town square, I let some tourists pat my belly and take selfies. Some of my friends have been shot in the head and had their teeth sawed from their skulls. Sweet friends. They wanted a big life. Then life came for them in the big way. Here's what I've lost. Manny, Horton, Olympus, Rebecca. I run 25 miles per hour and uproot entire trees by myself. I think I have something to offer here. I can be trained to sniff out bombs. I can recognize myself in a mirror. I know how to snorkel the length of a lake, and if I get tired, my body is so buoyant. I just let my muscles go limp and float for a while. I float through the gurgling dream. I float through the crocodile blackouts. On land, I stomp around like I own the place again. Everywhere I go, I leave a dent in the earth. When I'm gone, people come hunting for me. They kneel and scrutinize the spaces I've been. They press their fingers into the footprints. They touch the impressions I've made. Thanks all.
Benissimo. Thank you. Love this.
Thank you so much. And what I'd like to do now is, if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask one of our authors or both, this would be the time to do it. I don't think that there are questions yet in the chat, just some gratitude, some appreciation. Mary Catherine, yes.
I always feel I have to start it off. But, I thought my first question is for you, Andrea. Were you aware that both of our poets tonight were going to be having epistolary, right, poems? Yes. And then I'd like to delve in just a little bit to each of the poets about why it is you want to write a letter. And I know it has a long tradition in poetry, but it's pretty interesting, and they're so different, your 2 kinds of letters to people. And I found it fascinating and really wonderful. So, but Andrea, did you know that you were going to have letter writers here?
From the books, yes, I did know that, and that would have been the question I would have asked. So thank you, Mary Catherine. And I don't know which of you would like to start us off and shed a little light on what drives you with that.
Matthew?
Did you? Were you? Should I go first?
Sure, that'd be great.
All right. What draws me to the letter, I think I've always sort of been drawn to it, even when I wasn't writing them. My earliest poems were sort of represented unmailed letters. When I was a teenager, they'd be letters to people I couldn't talk to, or letters like when I didn't know how to say something, I would think of something to say later, and they might not have even been poems, but my first attempts at creative writing sort of had that impulse in it. So even if it wasn't addressing someone, it would often have someone that was named, it would have a direct address. And I kind of imagined it being to someone. And then later I started, that's always been something I think's been present in my writing. And when I was working on the poems that would fall into this book, it became something that I sort of more actively consciously pursued. I tried to just write a lot of them for a while, just to see what would happen if how I would be able to make it stay interesting to myself, or how I would create variation. And some of them are, more like apostrophe, and I like the sort of figurative possibilities that come when you move in that mode. And I'm also sort of intrigued by how I used to think of the letter as this thing where the muscle, where the craft element of the direct address is really shaped by what the speaker wants to say. And I've lately been thinking about just the way the person addressed, or the addressee, completely changes the way we understand the poem or the story. Like there's an epistolary novel, Dear American Airlines, where a guy writes basically his life story in a letter of complaint to American Airlines, which is not what you would expect someone to be saying to American Airlines, and it kind of changes the way you receive that information, or how you perceive the person who's speaking there. So those are I'll cut myself off there, because having been immersed in these letters for a long time, I feel like I could just kind of keep going. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it's interesting to hear you talk about how you were thinking about the letters, Matthew. I think there is some overlap in our thinking, that there is an addressee, that the letters are to someone. It, in my mind, suggests a reader, or the writer is trying to also shape themselves for someone else, right? The writer is of the letter, or in this case, the speaker in the poem is trying to make some appeal or argument in the letter. And so the way that I think about the work that the letters are doing, the epistolary poems are doing in the Renunciations, how to say this? I don't know if y'all have ever been in therapy and your therapist has been like, write a letter to somebody, but don't send it. So some of it's that, like, some of it's like, okay, there's nowhere for this to go except, but let me like sort of work through this. And in the Renunciations, there are epistolary poems that are mostly sonnet-ish, but then there are some that are redactions, and those are redactions of real letters that I wrote in that very therapeutic way. So I feel like there's a relationship between that sort of like shaping, but also that practice that really is actually for the speaker, right? Like the practice, the letter is not meant necessarily to be seen by the beloved. And so it's sort of functioning in some ways at cross purposes. Like so the speaker can be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit shapeless, even inside the little box of the sonnet.
Thank you. Thank you. Fiorella, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. It's a simple question, just because I have the doubt. The last reading was about, I'm sorry, what I wrote, Tim as a person. I'm like a TIM.
That's a question for you, Matthew.
Yes, please.
The last poem I read, or
Right.
the last poem was about like an elephant, and then the poem before, maybe the poem before,
Previous, please.
Blake Griffin dunks over a car. It was it starts with at the NBA slam dunk competition, I think 2011, that the one of the winning describing this Blake Griffin jumping over. I think it was like a Kia, and he had a choir singing behind him, and just describing that and thinking like, all right, is this sort of astonishing, but or is it sort of kind of ordinary, but because of all the frills around it, made it look a little more spectacular, and that's sort of how the poem started.
Yeah, and it was about it was a man's name, Tim. Yes,
That was in
Oh,
the greater
Tim.
good. That was in
Sorry.
the,
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I just want to clarify. It was like a person. When you say team, I don't know if it's a
Tim,
team,
TIM.
a group, or a team. You know, sorry about that.
Sorry, I misunderstood that question. Yeah, it was the name Tim, and some people have always have asked me about that poem. What is like, what's your problem with Tim, Matthew? And I've always seen Tim as kind of the hero of that poem. So, but so it's yeah, TIM, Tim.
Could you please? Okay, team. Okay, right, perfect. So yeah, okay, everything is clear now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions from our readers? I know that in the chat there's a lot of love. Any more questions? I have to say, I love. I don't even want to call it a device of the letter, because it feels organic and earned in your hands, the two of you, and it takes us to these places that keep surprising us as well, and. So whether and then of course it becomes a letter to the reader as well, doesn't it? So I want,
And it's also such a great 19th century tradition, I think. And that's what I really love about it, is that we're bringing that into the, current times, but it really is, think of Elizabeth Barrett Browning and people, I mean, that was a real 19th century thing. It's so wonderful to hear it brought up to date in the ways that both of you did so differently. It was wonderful to hear tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to thank you, Donika, and I want to thank you, Matthew, for your poems and for sharing them with us. And wish you a warm winter in Iowa City and in Hanover. And I hope to see you in real life in not too long as well.
Likewise, thank you.
oh,
Thanks.
thank you so much for having us, and thanks for y'all's good attention.